She came to defend history. He came to save his empire. Neither expected to fight for both. On weekday mornings, the block around the Gilded Page always smelled like roasted coffee and wet stone. It was an old part of Manhattan, the kind that refused to look modern no matter how many glass towers tried to loom over it. The sidewalks were uneven, the trees older than most of the nearby buildings, and the library itself stood like a stubborn relic from another century, all carved limestone and arched windows, its brass doors polished by generations of hands. Sofia Marshall loved it with an irrational, almost embarrassing devotion. She had walked past this building as a kid, backpack bouncing against her spine, pretending the place was a castle. She had studied for the bar exam inside its reading room, falling asleep under green banker lamps. She had written her first legal brief at the same long oak tables where professors and retirees still argued over newspapers. To her, the Gilded Page was not real estate. It was memory, evidence, proof that the city once cared about beauty, which was exactly why someone wanted it gone. She stood across the street now, coat collar turned up against the wind, staring at the construction survey flags stabbed into the ground like tiny warning signs. Orange, violent, temporary, a demolition pre-mark. Her jaw tightened. They're not even subtle anymore, she muttered. Inside her leather briefcase was a stack of documents thick enough to hurt someone with. Zoning challenges, preservation statutes, emergency injunction drafts. 7 months of work. 7 months of fighting one name. Vance Development. If rumors were true, they had already bought half the block. Offices, parking lots, 2 residential buildings. And now the library. The plan was simple and brutal. Tear it down. Pour concrete. Build another shining tower with a luxury hotel, luxury condos, luxury everything. Another monument to people who would never read a book inside it. Sofia checked her watch. 9:12. Court filing at 10. Coffee first, or she would commit homicide in front of a judge. She crossed the street toward the small cafe opposite the library, the one with fogged windows and a crooked chalkboard menu. The place smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso, and the barista knew half the neighborhood by name. The bell over the door chimed. Warm air wrapped around her. She exhaled. Morning, Sof, the barista called. The usual? Please. And make it strong enough to legally qualify as a weapon. A quiet laugh came from somewhere behind her. Low. Amused. Male. She hadn't noticed anyone else in line. She turned slightly. The man standing a few feet away didn't look like he belonged in this cafe. Too tailored. Too precise. Dark wool coat that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Perfect posture. Clean haircut. The kind of calm, controlled stillness you saw in surgeons or chess players. Or CEOs. He wasn't looking at his phone. Wasn't fidgeting. Just watching the street through the window like he was studying a battlefield. There was something annoyingly composed about him. Like nothing ever surprised him. He caught her glance and gave a small nod, polite but distant. Weaponized coffee, he said. That bad of a morning? Worse, she replied. It's a fight a billion-dollar corporation before lunch kind of day. One eyebrow lifted. Sounds ambitious. I'm an optimist. Or reckless. Same thing in this city. He smiled just barely. Damn it, she thought. He has a good smile. The barista handed her the cup. She moved to the side counter, but the cafe was crowded and the only free spot was the small table near him. She hesitated, then shrugged. It was New York. People shared tables. No big deal. She sat. For a moment they both worked in silence. Steam rose between them. Outside, the library stood heavy and quiet. You staring at the building, he said eventually, without looking at her, or guarding it? Both. He followed her gaze. The Gilded Page, right? You know it. I know buildings, he said. This one has presence. She snorted softly. That's a very diplomatic word for ancient. I was going to say stubborn. That too. It refuses to die. Everything dies eventually, he said calmly. She looked at him sharply. Well, that's a depressing philosophy for 9 in the morning. It's realistic. It's lazy, she countered. Demolition is easy. Preservation takes work. He finally turned to her fully. His eyes were darker than she expected. Focused. Analytical. Like he was cataloging her arguments. You think every old structure deserves saving? He asked. Not every. But the ones that mean something? Yes. Even if the land could generate more value another way. There are different kinds of value. Financial value keeps cities alive. Cultural value makes them worth living in. Silence. Not awkward. Charged. Like they'd accidentally stepped into a debate mid-sentence. He leaned back slightly, studying her like she'd just said something interesting in a meeting. "And what do you do?" he asked. "That makes you this passionate about architecture at 9 a.m.? "I'm a lawyer," she said. "Historic preservation. That explains the fire." "And you?" she asked. "You talk like a consultant or a politician. Both terrifying options." He huffed a quiet laugh. "Neither. I build things. Architect. Something like that. Vague. Deliberately vague." She noticed. "So you're on team, tear it down and start fresh, huh?" "I'm on team progress." "Progress doesn't have to mean erasing everything." "Sometimes it does," he said. "If a structure is losing money, draining resources, blocking growth, sentimentality isn't a strategy. And spreadsheets aren't a soul." Their eyes locked. There it was again. That spark. Not anger. Not quite attraction. Something sharper. Recognition. Like they'd just found an intellectual opponent worth respecting. He smiled first. "I have a feeling," he said, "that arguing with you would be exhausting." "Oh, absolutely," she replied. "I don't lose." "That sounds like a challenge." "It's a warning." They both laughed. Too easily. Too comfortably for strangers. Time slipped. They talked about cities they loved. About how Manhattan kept reinventing itself. About ugly skyscrapers and beautiful ones. About childhood libraries and late-night studying. She noticed he listened more than he spoke. When she ranted, he didn't interrupt. When he disagreed, he did it quietly, precisely, like placing chess pieces. It was nice. Dangerously nice. For a second, she forgot about the lawsuit in her bag. Forgot about Vance Development. Forgot about the war. Then her phone buzzed. A reminder. Preliminary hearing. 40 minutes. Reality snapped back into place. She stood quickly. "Damn. I have to run." "So soon?" he asked. "Yeah. Court waits for no one." Sadly, she grabbed her coat, then paused. "Hey, this was unexpectedly fun. For a random caffeine stop." "Agreed," he said. "It's rare to meet someone who argues like it's an Olympic sport." She grinned. "What's your name?" "A beat. Just a fraction too long." "Nicholas," he said. "Nick is fine." "Sophia." They shook hands. His grip was warm. Steady. Controlled. She hated how aware she suddenly was of it. "Well, Nick who builds things," she said, backing toward the door. "Try not to demolish anything historic today, okay?" He held her gaze. "No promises." She rolled her eyes and left, the bell chiming behind her. Across the street, she glanced once more at the library, then hurried toward the courthouse. Nicholas stayed seated, watching. After a moment, his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. "Board confirmation received. Acquisition finalized. Demolition permits ready for filing. Waiting on your approval, Mr. Vance." He looked up at the Gilded page. Then at the door she had just walked through. His jaw tightened slightly. Of course, he murmured to himself. Of all the cafes. Of all the mornings. Of all the people in New York. The preservation lawyer just had to be her. Nicholas Vance slipped the phone back into his pocket, finished his coffee, and stepped outside into the cold air. Across the street, the old library waited. And for the first time since buying the property, the decision to tear it down didn't feel purely mathematical anymore. Which, he knew, was a problem. A very expensive problem. And it had Sofia Marshall's smile all over it. Sofia had rehearsed this morning in her head at least a dozen times. Walk into the courthouse. File the motion. Present the preservation argument. Stay calm. Stay professional. Do not get emotional. Do not let Vance Development's lawyers bait you. Win. The marble lobby smelled like polish and old paper, the sound of heels and briefcases echoing off the high ceiling. Clerks moved like tired ghosts between security checkpoints. Everything felt routine, mechanical, familiar. Courtrooms had always been her natural habitat. Order, rules, logic, no surprises. Which was exactly why the surprise hit so hard. She pushed open the heavy wooden doors to the preliminary hearing room and stepped inside, already flipping through her notes. "Marshall for the plaintiff," she said automatically to the clerk. "Defense is already here," the clerk replied. Of course they were. Vance Development liked psychological games. Show up early. Claim territory. Make you feel late even when you weren't. Fine. Let them posture. She walked toward the long tables at the front, eyes still on her papers. Then she heard a voice. Calm. Familiar. Controlled. Good morning, counsel. Her brain recognized it before her body did. Her steps slowed. She looked up, and the world tilted slightly off balance. Nicholas. Coffee shop Nicholas. The man who talked about architecture and progress and stubborn buildings. He was standing on the opposite side of the courtroom table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly student loans. His posture was different now. Straighter, colder, surrounded by two attorneys and a stack of leather folders. Not an architect, not someone who builds things. At the center of the folders was a discreet silver logo. Vance Development. Her stomach dropped. No, 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 no. For a second, she genuinely wondered if her brain had stitched two strangers together by accident. But then he met her eyes, and she saw it. Recognition, and something worse. Regret. Ms. Marshall, he said quietly. Not Sophia. Not the easy café tone. Professional. Distant. Like a line had been drawn overnight. You've got to be kidding me, she whispered. One of the junior attorneys glanced between them, confused. You two know each other? Sophia didn't answer. She was staring at him like he'd personally betrayed her. You're Vance, she said. Not a question. A verdict. Yes. You're Nicholas Vance. Yes. The Nicholas Vance. Owner of the company trying to bulldoze my library. He exhaled slowly. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Heat rushed into her chest. Not embarrassment. Anger. Hot and sharp and immediate. She felt stupid. Stupid for laughing with him. For talking about childhood memories. For thinking he was interesting. He hadn't been some random guy. He'd been the enemy sitting across from her with a coffee, gathering data. Was that what yesterday was? She asked quietly. Recon. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her voice dropped. Did you know who I was? A beat. Yes. That hurt more than anything. And you still sat there talking to me like we were on some indie movie meet cute. I didn't plan it, he said. I just walked in and you were there. But you didn't say anything. No. Convenient. The judge entered before she could say something she'd regret. Everyone stood. Court mode snapped into place like armor. Fine. If he wanted professional, she would give him professional. The hearing began. Nicholas didn't speak much at first. He let his legal team handle the structure. Zoning law. Revenue reports. Employment projections. Charts showing how the new tower would generate thousands of jobs and millions in taxes. Clinical. Clean. Ruthless. Sophia listened, jaw tight. Then it was her turn. She stood, and everything changed. Her voice filled the room, steady and precise. She didn't talk about money. She talked about history. About the building surviving the blackout of '77. About immigrant kids learning English in that reading room. About architecture that couldn't be replicated because the quarry it came from no longer existed. This is not an obsolete asset, she said. It is a cultural anchor. Once it's gone forever. You cannot rebuild memory with glass and steel. Nicholas watched her the entire time. Not dismissive. Not bored. Focused. Like he was seeing her fully for the first time. She was brilliant. Terrifyingly brilliant. And every word she spoke made his life harder. Which should have annoyed him. Instead, it made him want to smile. Damn it. The judge postponed the final decision pending further review. Temporary stalemate. Everyone started packing up. Professional masks back on. She shoved papers into her briefcase a little too hard. Coffee shop, she said without looking at him. Was that part of your strategy too? Charm the opposition. No, he said quietly. That was the only honest part of my week. She paused. Didn't turn. Didn't trust herself to. You're destroying something people love, she said. For what? Another luxury tower. For survival, he replied. She finally looked at him. He didn't look smug. Didn't look greedy. He looked tired. There are things you don't know, he said. About my company. About why this deal matters. There always are, she said. Everyone thinks their reason is special. And what if it is? She hated that question, because a small part of her wanted to hear the answer. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Dinner. Tonight. Neutral ground. No lawyers. No contracts. Just talk. If we can find even one compromise, it's better than burning each other alive in court. That sounds dangerously close to fraternizing with the enemy. Call it a ceasefire. She studied him. Her brain screamed no. Conflict of interest. Risk. Emotional stupidity. But her chest remembered the café. The way he listened. The way their arguments felt like dancing instead of fighting. God, this was a terrible idea. Which probably meant she was going to say yes. One dinner, she said. We talk solutions. Not flirting. Not manipulation. A faint smile. Understood. And if you lie to me again, Nicholas Vance, she added, I will personally dismantle your empire in open court. He held her gaze. I believe you would. And somehow that sounded less like a threat and more like admiration. They walked out of the courthouse in opposite directions. Enemies again. Technically. But neither of them could ignore the uncomfortable truth settling in their chest. This war had just gotten personal, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. By the time evening settled over Manhattan, the city looked colder than usual, all glass and steel reflecting the last streaks of sunset like dull knives. Sofia walked fast without realizing it, heels striking the pavement in sharp, irritated beats, her briefcase tucked tight against her side as if someone might try to steal it. The courthouse was already 3 blocks behind her, but the day still clung to her skin. Nicholas Vance. Of all the people in New York, it had to be him. Not some faceless executive. Not a distant board. Him. The man from the café. The man she had laughed with. The man who had listened to her talk about books and childhood memories like it actually mattered. She felt stupid for letting her guard down. Stupider for still thinking about the way he looked at her when she spoke in court, like admiration had slipped past his defenses before he could stop it. She hated that part most of all. Her phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her out of the spiral. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered with a clipped, professional, Marshall. Ms. Sofia Marshall, a smooth male voice said. Older. Polished. The kind of voice that belonged to donors' dinners and backroom negotiations. I hope I'm not interrupting. My name is Elliot Drake. She slowed her steps. Everyone in city law knew that name. State senator. Career survivor. The kind of politician who always smiled during scandals and somehow never went down with the ship. What can I do for you, Senator? She asked carefully. I believe we share a mutual problem, he said. Nicholas Vance. The name landed like a stone in her stomach. I'm handling this through the courts, she replied. Legally. Of course you are, he said, almost amused. But sometimes the law needs encouragement. I have information that could end your case tomorrow. Permanently. She stopped walking altogether now. Taxis hissed past. People brushed her shoulders. She barely noticed. What kind of information? The kind you don't file through public records. Meet me. 10 minutes. Lexington Hotel Lounge. You'll want to see this in person. Before she could answer, the line went dead. She stared at her phone. Every instinct told her not to go. Nothing good ever started with a secret meeting requested by a politician. But if this really was about Vance Development, if it could protect the library. Damn it, she muttered, already turning toward the avenue. The hotel lounge was quiet and dim, expensive without trying too hard. Low lights, leather chairs, soft jazz humming in the background. Deals were made in places like this. Not the legal kind. The permanent kind. Drake sat alone at a corner table like he owned the building. Silver hair, tailored suit, relaxed posture. Predator disguised as a grandfather. He didn't stand when she approached. Just gave her a pleasant smile and gestured to the seat across from him. Ms. Marshall, thank you for coming. I have 10 minutes, she said. What is this about? He slid a thin folder across the table. Open it. She didn't like how casual he sounded. Still, she flipped it open. Inside were bank statements, acquisition contracts, shell company registrations, highlighted transfers moving through 3 different countries. Property purchases under names she didn't recognize. Money looping back into Vance Development subsidiaries. The pattern was obvious even at a glance. It looked like fraud. Serious fraud. The kind that destroyed companies overnight. Her pulse picked up. Where did you get this? Sources, he said lightly. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He leaned back. You're fighting Vance on sentimental grounds. History, culture, preservation. Admirable. But he's fighting with capital. Lawyers. Time. You could spend months in court. He tapped the folder. Or you could file this and watch him settle before sunrise. She studied the papers again. If they were real, the case wouldn't even be about the library anymore. It would become a criminal investigation. Vance would be finished. Too easy, her brain warned. Way too easy. And what do you get out of this? She asked. Drake smiled slowly, like she'd finally asked the intelligent question. Let's just say I prefer someone else controlling that block of Manhattan. Someone more cooperative with the city. So you don't care about saving the library, she said. I care about stopping Nicholas Vance. That's not the same thing. His expression hardened a fraction. This is New York, Ms. Marshall. Nobody wins clean. You either use leverage or you get crushed by someone who will. I'm offering you leverage. She imagined it for a second. Walking into court, dropping this on the judge's desk, watching Vance's legal team scramble, watching him lose, watching the demolition permits die with him. It would protect the building. It would guarantee victory. Her career would explode overnight. But something about it felt rotten, like winning by poisoning the water supply. If this was obtained illegally, I can't use it, she said. Can't, he repeated softly. Or won't. She held his gaze. Both. Drake sighed like she was being childish. Idealism is expensive. Men like Vance don't play fair. Why should you? Because if I become like him, what exactly am I saving, she thought. She closed the folder and slid it back. I'll think about it. Don't think too long, he said. Opportunities disappear. So do buildings. Outside, the night air felt sharper. Cleaner. She breathed in hard, trying to shake the smell of that room off her clothes. Her hands were still tense. She hated that he'd tempted her. Hated that for a split second she'd wanted the shortcut. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. An address. A time. No explanation. Nicholas. Dinner. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Hours ago, meeting him had felt reckless but harmless. Now it felt like stepping onto a fault line. In her bag was the possibility of destroying him with one signature. In her chest was the uncomfortable memory of the man who had listened to her talk about libraries like they mattered. If Drake was telling the truth, Nicholas might be corrupt. If Drake was lying, she was about to become someone else's weapon. Great, she muttered. No pressure. She should go home. Review evidence. Stay objective. Instead, she hailed a cab and gave the driver Nicholas's address. Because before she decided whether to ruin his life, she needed to look him in the eyes and find out who he really was. The charity auction was held in a restored Beaux-Arts ballroom on the Upper East Side, the kind of place designed to impress donors and intimidate everyone else. Crystal chandeliers hung low like frozen fireworks, scattering warm light over polished marble floors. Waiters moved silently between clusters of guests carrying champagne flutes that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. A string quartet played something soft and tasteful in the corner, just loud enough to make every conversation feel important. It was the perfect setting for rich people to pretend they were saving the world while quietly deciding who got to own it. Sofia felt wildly out of place. She stood near the entrance, adjusting the sleeve of her black dress, the only formal thing she owned that didn't scream courtroom. Her reflection in the mirrored wall looked composed, confident, professional. Inside, she was a live wire. The past 24 hours had twisted her nerves tight. Drake's folder still felt like a physical weight in her bag, even though she had left it at home. She didn't trust herself to carry it tonight. This wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a battlefield disguised as philanthropy. The city council, investors, preservation boards, developers, they were all here. And somewhere in this glittering crowd, the future of the Gilded page would quietly be decided through bids, partnerships, and whispered alliances. Whoever secured the controlling stake in the surrounding parcels would effectively control the block, including the library. Glad you came. She turned. Nicholas. Dark suit again, but less corporate tonight. No tie. Collar open. He looked almost human instead of untouchable, which somehow made him more dangerous. You said neutral ground, she said. This looks like the Hunger Games for billionaires. A corner of his mouth lifted. That's fairly accurate. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the noise of the ballroom fading into the background. Things were different now. He wasn't a stranger from a café. He wasn't just opposing counsel. He was a problem she didn't know how to solve. You look tense, he said quietly. I met a politician today, she replied. That usually ruins anyone's mood. His eyes sharpened. Drake. That surprised her. You guessed fast. He's been circling this project for months. If he talked to you, it wasn't to help. He offered me help, she said, making air quotes. The illegal kind. Nicholas's jaw tightened, just slightly. What did he give you? Enough to destroy you. He didn't even flinch. And if I wanted you destroyed, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Something in his expression softened. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude he didn't want to show. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, she replied. I still might sue you into oblivion the old-fashioned way. That I can respect. They moved toward the bar together, shoulders almost brushing. The closeness made her hyper-aware of everything. His voice, the warmth of his hand when he passed her a glass of water, the quiet steadiness of him. It was infuriating that the man threatening her favorite place in the world felt safer than most people she knew. "Tell me the truth," she said. "No PR version. Why this building? Why this block? There are 100 places you could develop." He stared into his drink for a long second before answering. "Because this project is the only thing keeping my company alive." She frowned. "You're a billionaire." "My company isn't," he said. "My father over-leveraged everything before he died. Bad acquisitions. Ego projects. Debt stacked on debt. When he passed, he left me an empire that looked powerful and was actually collapsing from the inside. That's not public knowledge. It's not supposed to be." His voice stayed calm, but there was something raw under it now. "If this tower doesn't go through, lenders pull out. Thousands of employees lose their jobs. Not executives. Engineers. Office staff. People with mortgages. I'm not building it for fun. I'm building it to stop a chain reaction." She studied him carefully, looking for manipulation. Spin. Anything rehearsed. She didn't find it. "That still doesn't make demolishing the library right," she said softly. "I know." The admission hit her harder than any argument could have. "I just didn't see another option," he added. "Until you." Before she could respond, a voice boomed across the room. "Well, isn't this cozy?" They both turned. Elliot Drake. He approached with the relaxed swagger of someone who already believed he'd won. A few council members trailed behind him, along with 2 reporters Sofia recognized from local politics. "Cameras. Of course." "Senator," Nicholas said coolly. "Mr. Vance." "Ms. Marshall." Drake's smile was pure theater. "I have to say, this is fascinating. The city's most righteous preservation lawyer sharing drinks with the very developer she's suing. Optics aren't great, are they?" Sophia's spine went rigid. "We're discussing—" "Oh, I'm sure you are," he interrupted loudly, making sure people nearby could hear. "Discussing settlements? Or something more personal?" Heads turned. Whispers spread like sparks. Reporters lifted their phones. "You're out of line," Nicholas said, voice dropping to something dangerous. "No, I'm practical," Drake replied. "Conflict of interest is a serious matter. Wouldn't want the public thinking our brave attorney sold out the library for a romantic dinner." The word romantic hit like a slap. Sofia felt heat crawl up her neck. This wasn't an attack. It was an execution. If donors believed she was compromised, her entire case could collapse. Judges hated impropriety, even the appearance of it. "You set this up," she said quietly. Drake winked. "Politics, Ms. Marshall. You really should learn the rules." For a split second, panic tried to take over. Her reputation, her case, months of work, all about to be shredded in 30 seconds of gossip. Then something inside her clicked into place. Courtroom mode. Calm. Precise. Surgical. "Actually," she said, raising her voice just enough to cut through the murmurs, "since we're talking about transparency, maybe we should discuss why you're really interested in this property, Senator." Drake's smile faltered. "Just a hair." Nicholas looked at her, confused. She met his eyes briefly. "Trust me." She pulled out her phone. Nicholas, catching on fast, slid a small flash drive into her hand under the table edge. Data he'd given her earlier, internal audits, land records, everything he'd quietly compiled on Drake over the past year. Insurance, he'd called it. She hadn't expected to use it tonight. But fine. If Drake wanted a show, she'd give him one. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, turning slightly so the reporters could hear, "before anyone questions my ethics, you might want to ask Senator Drake why 3 shell companies connected to his donors have been purchasing properties surrounding this block for months. Properties that would skyrocket in value if Vance Development were forced out." The room went still. "One of those companies," she continued, "shares an address with a lobbying firm currently under investigation for illegal land flips. I have the filings right here. Public record." A reporter blinked. "Senator, is that true?" Drake's pleasant mask cracked. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" Sofia said calmly. "Because it looks an awful lot like you're trying to scare off competition so you can grab the land yourself. Not save the library. Not protect the city. Just profit." Phones were fully out now. Recording. Whispers turned sharp. Drake glanced around and realized, too late, that the spotlight had flipped. "You're making a mistake," he hissed at her. "No," she said evenly. "I'm making a record." Security started edging closer. Donors stepped away from him like he carried something contagious. For the first time since she'd met him, Elliot Drake looked small. He left without another word. The tension drained out of the room in messy waves. Conversations restarted. Music resumed. But the damage was done. His credibility had taken a public hit he couldn't spin easily. Sofia exhaled slowly, adrenaline shaking her hands. Nicholas stepped closer. That was terrifyingly impressive. She laughed weakly. I think I just started a political war. You won it, he said. She looked up at him. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for you. I know, he said softly. That's why it matters. For a moment, the noise faded again. Just the two of them standing there, breathing the same air, both a little wrecked and a little victorious. Enemies. Allies. Something in between. And somewhere beneath the chandeliers and the music and the collapsing schemes of corrupt men, Sofia realized the fight was no longer just about saving a building. It was about choosing what kind of people they were going to be when the city tried to break them. Morning came gray and quiet, like the city was hungover after the previous night's spectacle. Rain clung to the sidewalks in thin, reflective sheets, turning Manhattan into a watercolor of steel and glass. Sofia stood across the street from the Gilded Page again, hands wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold, staring at the building the way people stare at hospital rooms while waiting for news. 24 hours ago, its fate had depended on court arguments and political games. Now everything felt strangely suspended, like the city itself was holding its breath. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. 3 reporters, 2 colleagues. One very cautious message from the preservation board asking what the hell had happened at the auction, and an official notice from the city. Elliot Drake was under ethics review pending investigation into undisclosed property interests. It wasn't a conviction, but it was enough. His backroom land grab had stalled. His influence over the block had evaporated overnight. The biggest predator in the room had tripped over his own trap. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. Victories weren't clean. They were messy and stressful and came with consequences she hadn't mapped out yet. Footsteps approached behind her, measured and familiar. She didn't turn immediately. She already knew. You always guard it like that? Nicholas asked softly. Like someone's going to steal it if you blink. They keep trying, she said. He came to stand beside her, hands in his coat pockets, gaze fixed on the library. No security detail. No lawyers. Just him. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look like a CEO or an opponent. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. City Council called at 6, he said. Between Drake's investigation and the PR disaster last night, the board pulled support for the tower. Investors hate scandal. She absorbed that slowly. Meaning the skyscraper is dead. The word hung there. Dead. The thing she'd been fighting for months, just gone. She waited for relief to crash over her. Instead, there was only a strange emptiness. You lost a lot of money, she said. He let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. A lot doesn't even cover it. And your company? Still in trouble, he admitted. But not terminal. I'll sell assets. Restructure. Smaller projects. Slower growth. He glanced at her. Less dramatic than a 50-story tower. Less destructive, too. Yeah. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything that had happened. So that's it, she asked. War over. It doesn't feel like winning, does it? He said. She shook her head. It feels like we blew everything up and now we're standing in the smoke. He studied the library again, thoughtful. I've been thinking about that. Dangerous hobby. I know. He turned to face her fully. What if we're both wrong? Excuse me. You're fighting to freeze the past. I was trying to bulldoze it for the future. Maybe both extremes are stupid. She crossed her arms. Go on. What if the building doesn't have to die, he said slowly. But it doesn't have to stay a museum piece either? She frowned. What are you suggesting? Restoration. Structural reinforcement. Modern systems. Turn it into a cultural and tech hub. Public space, archives, co-working floors for nonprofits, education programs. Something that generates revenue without killing its soul. She blinked at him. You're talking about adaptive reuse. I'm talking about not being your villain anymore. Her heart did an annoying little flip she absolutely did not approve of. And where exactly does the money come from? Smaller eco tower on the adjacent lot, he said. Half the height. Offices and labs. Profitable, but not obscene. The revenue funds the library long term. No demolition. No. Displacement. She stared at him. You'd cut your project in half. More than half. Your investors will hate it. Some will walk. He shrugged lightly. The ones who stay are the ones I actually want. That answer was so unexpectedly honest it knocked the air out of her lungs. Why? She asked quietly. Why give up that much? He didn't look away this time. Because last night I realized something. If I win by becoming my father, then what exactly did I save? The vulnerability in his voice hit harder than any speech. And, he added, softer, because you were right. A city without memory is just expensive concrete. She looked back at the gilded page. The carved stone. The tall windows. The ghosts of every version of herself that had ever walked through those doors. She imagined it alive again. Not abandoned. Not doomed. Kids inside. Light on. History and future in the same space. Not preserved like a corpse. Not erased like a mistake. Something new. Something better. You realize, she said. If we do this, we'll both get attacked. Preservation purists will say I sold out. Developers will say you went soft. Let them, he said. For once, I'd like to build something I don't have to defend in court. She laughed under her breath. That would put me out of a job. We could call you a consultant, he said. Terrifying chief of ethics. That sounds expensive. Worth it. The rain started again, light and steady. People hurried past them, umbrellas opening like flowers. The city moving on, as it always did. So, he said carefully, partner. She studied him one last time, searching for calculation. For hidden angles. For the cold strategist from the courtroom. She didn't find him. Just a tired, stubborn man trying to fix a mess he hadn't fully created. Slowly, she held out her hand. Partner, but if you ever lie to me again, I will personally bankrupt you. He took her hand, warm and steady. Fair. They didn't let go right away. Across the street, morning light caught on the library windows, turning them gold for just a second, like the building itself was exhaling. And for the first time since this whole war began, Sofia didn't feel like she was guarding something that was about to be stolen. She felt like she was standing at the foundation of something new, something neither of them could have built alone.